Yeah, thanks for coming out, John.
Thanks for having me.
What do you do for a living?
That's a great question. I keep trying things over and over again since college, and some of them have worked. Right now, my primary line of work, I'm a DIT in the motion picture industry, which is best described as an IT guy for a movie set. The cameras are all computers now. They've been computers for about 15 years. Computers are dumb. They're annoying. They need networking. They need all the things that go along with having a complex system. And on a big movie set, it's often just makes sense to keep an IT person on staff. That's kind of the way to describe why you need a DIT on set. Most of the work that I do is around color management, because color management is all data management now. Signal management, because everybody needs to see an image and they need to be sure it's a genuine image. They can say, yes, that's how I like how that looks. The black levels are correct. The white levels are correct. The contrast is correct.
You are very good at this.
Thank you.
Because when client comes over, it's all, all the people come over and they say, hey, we want to see that last shot.
Right. Is that actually what it's going to look like?
And you pull it up and you put some like,
make it pretty.
You make it pretty, man,
right.
And you're super good at what you do, man. Seriously.
Not to talk about work too much, but the thing that I think that makes me good at this is I actually kind of enjoy troubleshooting. Most people don't enjoy that part of their job when one part of a complex system isn't working and they have to, like, in the field under pressure, isolate what is the weird, what's the bad cable, what's the bad transmission, what piece of equipment needs a firmware update. I actually kind of enjoy that process and it doesn't stress me out. If you don't like that process, you should not go into IT in general. It's just going to drive you insane. It'll keep you up at night. You'll have those nightmares where it's like, I can't figure out what the heck is going on,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's why you're like the guy. I know there's Damon. Shout out to Damon.
There's a bunch of us.
I know there's more.
Well,
I know there's more, but I feel like you and Damon are just the guys. And if you're booked, then it's like...
In this town, it's the two of us. Matt Ruggieri comes out often.
Matt's great,
but
too.
He's a busy guy. He's got his own, studio system going.
Yeah.
And, it's... He loves to be on set, but he's got so many balls in the air, I think, that DIT is sort of like the other thing that he does sometimes.
Yeah. What about your personal life?
What about my personal life? So I'm a father of 4. They are all teenagers now, which is my favorite. So far, it's my favorite age to deal with. My oldest is 18, and then I have 16, and then I have twins who are about to turn 14 in August. They're all pretty close together in age, so I'm not going to say they all get along all the time, but they all relate to each other all the time, which is really nice. I think when you have a wider age gap in kids, they'll all go through phases where they're like, I don't want to hang out with my little sibling.
Sure. She's
a child and I'm a big kid.
What was your least favorite? You said this is your favorite.
Oh, well, babies are just so much work. And when they were all so close together, it was like constant diapers and constant tantrums and all of the energy that it takes to raise a baby. Babies require constant focus, no matter what the only time you get peace and quiet when you have a baby is when you can control everything in the environment. And you can kind of only do that at home. So every time you go out with a baby, you're on alert, unless you're in a very child-friendly environment, which is rare. There's a thing, and all kids are different. So every child is definitely different, clearly.
Yeah.
I think my heart always goes out to parents who have kids little kids specifically, whose developmental milestones are really far ahead in gross motor skills and fine motor skills and a little behind in verbal receptive and verbal communicative skills. Because every kid develops differently. Some kids race ahead in one and fall back in the other, and then they catch up later. It's normal. When you have a kid who is really physical, is great at climbing stairs, and is great at picking locks and doing all that stuff, but their verbal, receptive, and communicative is a little behind, they're really hard to control because they can't communicate very well yet. But they can get up the stairs, and they can open the doors, and they can do all these things. And that's tricky. Those kids, when they're babies, take the most amount of
It
work.
sounds like you might have had one or two of
I had one that was definitely like that. I had a couple others that were just mischief kids. And I had two that I would say are the opposite, that are really easy, not easy. They're very verbal, and they were a little behind in like the gross motor and the fine motor. And those kids, you look at them and you're like, no, we're not. It's not time for cookies right now. And they're like, and they get it, but they also aren't physically able to climb up the cabinets and break into the cookie jar yet. They're just not that coordinated. So they understand, they learn the rules before they learn how to break the rules. And those kids are just a little bit easier to manage when they're little.
Yeah.
I mean, all kids change a couple times before they turn into adults, and you have different challenges every year for every child. But it's definitely a specific type of headache that the parents of young children have when they're like, oh, yeah, we have to install like top locks on the doors because he knows how to open everything, and we have to, the child-proofing cabinets because you can't. We
still have them up, although we don't really need
Right.
them. We're slow to take them down. But Adrian put those up like super quick.
Yeah.
So props to her.
It's
Do you have who's the mother of these kids?
So it's all one mother, my ex-wife, who's a wonderful mom. She and I are in a really good co-parenting situation. The kids are they're with me for most of the week. They're with her most of the weekends. And now they're old enough that they're kind of opinionated about whose house they are when, like I want to be at this house because my friends are having a birthday party. I want to be at this house because I want to talk to mom about whatever it is I'm going through. And I think that's healthy. I always, but we both are in very much agreement that neither wants to compromise the other one's time with the kids. Right. Like, so when one of my kids says, I want to be at dad's house for the weekend because whatever it is, my friends are having a party or whatever, or I just don't feel like sharing space with my teenage siblings right now because that's a whole thing, then, we have to remind them all, like, I'm not here to take mom's time away from her with you, so we can talk about that, but you don't have free reign over until they get a little older. And now, like, my 16-year-old and 18-year-old kind of can pick where they want to be when. And they basically do what I expect, which is most of the time they want to be with their siblings, because when you're a kid, your siblings are much more interesting than your parents, right? Like, they like hanging out with me,
Sure.
but like, let's be real, I'm their dad.
Sure. So what would you say to somebody that's co-parenting right now or just starting to? Like, what was the hardest part for you guys when you decided to kind of go your separate ways, if for lack of a better phrase?
I think the hardest, another divorced dad and I bonded when I said something like, I don't know why I thought divorcing would mean I wouldn't have to argue with my ex-wife about money anymore, because that was kind of something that we always butted heads about, and it's not like that goes away. But there are, a little more structured rules about it and things, and that kind of, we got married super young. It probably would have been really good if we saw like a financial somebody, like when we were married for like 5 years, to like nail down, like, this is how you should talk about money. This is how you should handle finances, instead of what we stumbled into, which was, two young kids trying to figure out how to survive through the great financial crisis.
This is back in 2008.
This is, yeah. So this is like, it is what it is. And, we both came out of it, I think, better people. I think we're both better at being both parents and adult human beings, separate than we were together. And her, her new husband's a great guy. He loves the kids. They both love the kids like crazy, and they always put them first. So if I was going to give advice to people about, like, okay, you guys aren't going to work out as a couple, but you want to work out as parents. Like, the first lesson is, don't badmouth each other to the kids. Just don't ever badmouth each other to the kids. You're gonna roll your eyes at each other. You're gonna close the door after you have a conversation or a meeting and be like, oh my God, I can't stand my ex-husband. He's always doing whatever, blah, 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 blah. There he goes again. That energy shouldn't be part of the kids' ecosystem. You just don't. It's not good for them mentally, and it's not a good example to set for them about, like, how relationships should be structured.
Did you find yourself doing that, bad-mouthing her, and then realizing, oh, Or is it just something you kind of knew from the start?
I knew from the start because I've seen parents do that kind of stuff. I remember growing up with like some divorced parents, and kids are super perceptive. Like I was friends with these kids, and I could like hear the tone of voice out of like a mom or a dad's mouth when they would talk about like, well, your father, right? And you could tell like kids are super perceptive. They know like, oh, there's some bad energy there, like, and it's not a good look. Right? Like, you're both in agreement that the kids come first. Act like it, and don't undermine each other. Don't badmouth each other. If a kid comes at you and says like, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and it's something that you should run by your ex, you should run it by your ex. And important decisions like what school should this kid go to? And should we call the school about the bullying? Or do we let them handle it themselves? Like this kind of stuff. Yeah. Like, put the kid first, but like consult the other parent. Even if you're like 99% sure what the answer is going to be, I'm going to call the school about the bullying. I want to be on the same page about this. Your ex will appreciate you saying that kind of thing because it means that your opinion is valid. I always value when she comes at me and says like, hey, so this is a thing, this medication needs to change, or, this, whatever it is, whatever. I mean, it's family stuff like this is always high, low stakes. It's like I care deeply, deeply, deeply about this one kid's problem with their one teacher. In the grand scheme of things, a lot of it doesn't matter, and it's going to solve itself, and it's going to work itself out. And you shouldn't fight all your kids' battles. A lot of it is this or that kid wants to drop out of swim lessons or whatever it is, and I think that they should stick it out. They need to learn to sort their old battles, and I want to make sure that when they come crying to me, they get the same answer as when they come crying to you, even though we don't live in the same house anymore.
Right.
So,
yeah, I've heard the commitment thing. That's something we've started to introduce our daughter to activities.
Yeah.
And we had a bad experience with gymnastics. She just panicked. She freaked out. She wouldn't go.
It's hard.
And she's 3 years old.
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
But once we sign up for something and you've been there and we've done it, once you're 6 or 7 years old, I think it's time to learn about commitment.
Right.
And that's just something I read and that really resonated. Like, okay, that seems fair,
yeah.
Right? Because we're all just doing this. Well, I'm doing this for the first time,
right?
So if I go back, your oldest is 18, 19.
Yeah.
So this would be 15 years ago if you can remember way back.
I do remember when it was like 15 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And kids we have to remember that kids don't know that things are hard. They don't. They're 3, they're 4. Everything that they're interested in trying, they master because their brains are soft and they're amazing at everything. So if they want to learn to, I don't know, climb the stairs or like run around or play tag, they master it really quick, right? They're great at everything that they put their mind to. But so far, they've only ever put their mind to anything that they've found a natural affinity for. And the process of like buckling down and doing something that's hard, that you don't have a natural inclination to love immediately, is maybe one of the most valuable skills, period. And okay, so I'm probably you should have Franklin come on your podcast one day. He is my best friend. Franklin is, his kids are a little younger than my kids. And he's the son of Chinese immigrants, and his wife is the son of Egyptian immigrants. So for some reason, I've always gotten along with the children of immigrants. Like I came from a Jewish household, so like I'm always like 1 foot outside of standard American culture. And for some reason, not all, but let's say most of my longest lasting best relationships, a lot of them have been with the children of immigrants. Franklin and I talk about parenting all the time. And he was, I've met his parents. They're great parents. But it was very much a very classic Chinese upbringing of high discipline, high expectations. You're going to take piano lessons, even though you're not particularly interested in playing the piano. You're going to master it because, I grew up hearing about this kind of parenting from my friends who were sometimes the children of immigrants and how horrible it sounded, right? Like, oh God, that's borderline child abuse. That's often what is said by American kids. They're like, I can't believe that your parents would do that to you. And it's a very different Like, so we talk about it. And one of the principal tenets of that kind of upbringing is the kids don't know how amazing they are at mastering a skill unless you force them to master a skill. Even something that they don't really like. Yes, piano, just pick something. Violin, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the skill is. Just learn that you can master something. That's actually really valuable. I think all of us are going to say, all right, but there's extremes in either direction. And one thing I remind young parents of is the way, if we don't monitor ourselves as parents, it's really easy to raise your kids as if your goal was to give them as much dopamine as possible all day long, right? It is a really easy thing to do. Oh, you woke up, let's put you in front of the TV for breakfast. Okay, you're done, we're done with breakfast. All right, here, play on your iPad for a little while before we go run errands. Okay, we're going to run errands and you can play with dad's phone for a little bit while we're in the car. And every moment, it is easier to manage a kid who's dopaminized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we say it objectively, oh, well, I want to make sure that I get my kid as much dopamine as possible all day long. We'd say, well, obviously that's awful for them. But it's easy to fall into that trap, especially when they're little and they're difficult to control. So the ideal, there's no ideal. But like if we were going to be objective and perfect and say, all right, well, where do I want to put my kids on the spectrum between you must do hard things and have some more dopamine? Everyone would put them somewhere in the middle and say, well, this seems reasonable. Mm-hmm. So be aware where you are on that spectrum, like when you have a little kid. One of the biggest things that I'm hearing from teachers and on teachers' forums and my own is it is apparent that an awful lot of kids have had unfiltered access to handheld screens since before they could walk. I don't have data in front of me, but it's probably going to be the cigarettes of our generation. We're going to look backwards at the data and say, this stops emotional regulation development. Like these kids haven't had time or need to learn to emotionally regulate themselves on their own. They've used a device instead. Whenever they've had an emotional turmoil, they've used it as an emotional pacifier. And that's really bad for long-term planning and focus and attention and regulating yourself in an environment that's hard.
Yeah, I think there's I love all what you just said, by the way.
Okay, good.
That's beautiful.
Bit of a ramble.
I was like, just keep going, man, because like this is exactly what I want to hear. This is what I believe in too.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to like sprinkle frustration on my child. That sounds terrible, but I'm like, no, like,
job.
Like, I'm here. I'm just watching you. I'm watching you struggle. I'll help you if you come to me after I watch you struggle.
Yes.
Now, if you just come to me right away, like, here, open this package of gummies.
Yeah.
No, you got it.
You should try it.
Yeah. No, right there. Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah.
So, but what I was going to say is, kind of going back to co-parenting or just parenting in a happy marriage, I think to generalize, I think that's why it's important to have, let's just say masculine and feminine traits when you are a parent for a child. So what I mean by that is, I want to be careful about how I say this.
Right. You're walking on a landmine. And
I am walking on a landmine. Right. What I'm trying to say is, let's just generalize for a second.
Sure.
I have found myself and all of my dad friends, we are much more interested in seeing our kids take risks and much more interested in kind of encouraging and pushing them out on the bike,
right.
Doing hard things.
Yeah.
And that's not to say moms don't do that. They absolutely do.
Right.
But I think a lot of what I see from everyone around me is moms are just a little bit more worried, right? So they're less likely to push their kid out on a bike and it's so much easier to protect. Like you have that mama bear instinct to protect your kids. You don't want them to like struggle too much or suffer, right?
Right.
So that's something where I think it's important to have, let's just say two people that have different opinions on, risk versus nurture.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that there's going to always be, almost in any like endeavor, you're going to have people land at different spots on a spectrum and say, not enough risk, too much risk, whatever it is. And if they look at the situation and say, let's push harder, because the other one isn't pushing harder, they'll adopt it. And what you said is actually, I'm like, okay. And I have no problem with using like the gender norms for those terms, partially because like my upbringing was kind of the opposite. My dad worried about everything. My dad was such a worry guy, like, all the time. And my mom was, I would say, more, I think that they might have been more aligned than what you described. They're probably closer together on like what is an appropriate amount of risk that we should be pushing. But my mom was always very, like, I remember even when I was 24 years old and I needed a car, and my mom came with me to the dealership to help like negotiate and navigate. I was still a young guy. And I knew what car I wanted. The only one they had available in that like model and price and things was a stick shift. I'd never driven stick before, right? Never. But I needed a car like soon. I had a big job coming up. And the guy at the dealership says, yeah, this is what we have. And then he walked away, and I look at my mom like, I don't know how to drive stick. And she goes, fucking learn. Right.
Yeah.
So right. And I couldn't help but laugh. Mom swears like a devil. It's hilarious. And, it was a little bit of like, dressing me down, but I was like, okay, she's right. I got to learn. I'll just learn how to drive stick. And my dad taught me how to drive stick because he's a better driver than my mom at stick. Don't let her say that or don't let her hear that, because she'll be like, no, he's not.
Sorry, Miss Fallon.
That's fine. Well, he was driving stick at the time for like decades. He had a truck and he was always a stick shift driver. Sure. And he also taught me to drive because my mom was a nervous wreck about teaching. She would put her feet through the floor trying to hit the imaginary brake. So it's always different. Like some risks, one parent might look at a risk situation and say, that's not for me. I can't, that's too much. And another one might say, okay, I've got this situation. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I appreciate how you said that and how you worded that, because that's probably a better statement, right? Like there are so many different risks.
Right.
I don't, going at the beach, flinging my kid around on the boogie board. She might fall off into the water.
Yeah. Oh, my dad. That's my
okay.
dad. And my mom can't even watch. Right. But like there are other things where my dad is I think my dad worries about money. Right. Like he worries about finances. And he was the primary breadwinner for most of my childhood. My mom always worked too, but she also took a couple of breaks from her career to like do mom stuff when it was needed. So my dad was always the primary, and he always was like super nose to the ground, oh my God, we're going to run out of money. I'm so stressed about work. What are these kids going to do for a living when they grow up? Like, I hope. And my mom is a mathematician and was always like, okay, let's do a budget. And she would pull out the spreadsheet and she'd do the math, and she sat me down next to her and was like, this is how you do a budget, right? Because your dad can't do this because he'll just freak out at the numbers and he'll have a panic attack. We're doing fine. We're just going to have to like not do this year, whatever it was, and that's their relationship. It's sort of hysterical. And like now my dad's retired and it's like a totally different dude. It's the same dude, but it's a totally different dude, because this workaholic stress machine that used to be my dad, who never watched TV. He would never watch TV. I don't have time for that. It's a waste of time. It's addictive. I'm going to go whatever it was. He's always working out. He's a very exercisey dude. And that was my dad. And then he retired. And he's like, have you seen Expanse? And I'm like, the TV show? And he's like, it's amazing. There's 6 seasons. I've watched it twice. You got to watch it. And I'm like,
who are you?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the energy. It's hilarious. And he's like, he's got good taste in shows. He's got good taste. I'm like, who is this man? He's like, chill. He grows hair out. It's funny.
Yeah.
So,
do you see any similarities with your kids?
They are the personality types of, like, there's some repeating personalities that happen in a lot of families, and I think that's true. Oh, you're just like your uncle, like that kind of stuff.
I feel like when having kids, I've heard this before, and it really stuck with me, was like when you have a kid, it's basically just a mosaic of your extended family.
Right.
Like you're just taking your uncle's eyes and your grandpa's nose.
Yeah.
And sometimes your kids do look just like you, but a lot of times they don't. And it's just but anyway, yeah.
And a lot of that, like, oh, you're just like your uncle, a lot of that is certainly not just nature, but nurture, because we do raise our kids in a way that we were raised also. I mean, we all try and improve upon the process, and we also have the added input from a spouse. But inevitably, you're going to get some repeated personalities that come out because of repeated styles of upbringing. So you can't just say like, oh, it's just, it's only nature. It was inevitable that this kid was going to turn out just like X, Y, or Z. But anyway, the personalities of my kids are...
well, let's pause for a second.
Sure.
What did you take from your childhood into your parenting?
That's a great question. So I think that like a big thing... My brother and I were always very self-directed people. Like we were always, I know what I want to do. This is what I'm going to be doing. This is what I'm going to study. I'm interested in this process. I like this. I don't like that. And it brought us success. Like we thrived in whatever fields not immediately, but like it was never, motivating us was never an issue for the most part. There's some caveats. Like there's no straight line to being an adult.
Right.
But that was something I was like, yeah, this is how you raise kids. You let them discover the things that they're interested in, period. And for the most part, that's pretty good with my kids. Like they're pretty good at being like, I excel at this and I enjoy doing it and I'm going to devote some time and attention to mastering it or whatever. And, because you don't want your kids to do what? You don't want them to sit on the couch all day and play video games. You don't want them to not apply themselves, not to sound like a broken record, but like that's, you don't want them to waste their potential. You don't want them to get lazy.
It's all about balance, right?
It is all about balance.
You can have the video games.
Right.
You just can't do it 5 hours a day. You can do it 1 hour a day.
Exactly.
Or whatever, whatever. Right. Find your balance. But yeah.
And some kids require more of that like reminder than other kids. Mm-hmm. And I think that a hands-off approach to that dynamic, that back and forth, with like some limits on screen time and like, this is what, you got to do your homework before you can play your video, whatever it is, like just kind of ground rules was definitely part of my childhood and kind of what I'm doing with them, right? Like I assume, and it's been working so far, that if I give you a variety of options on things that you can apply yourself to, whether it's music or dance or academics or engineering, whatever it is, you'll find one and enjoy mastering it. Ask me in a decade if it still works. I think it works pretty well as long as there are situations that get presented to the kids often that are exciting like this, right? Like, so I'm trying the newest. I do a lot of home renovation projects. I'm a real we're just going to do this ourselves kind of person, sometimes to a fault. And this summer, hopefully, the project is the back porch. We ripped up the old back porch and we're going to put a new one in. We're in the design phase right now. Actually, we're in the permitting phase right now. The design is finished and I have to wait to hear from Baltimore County if we're allowed to dig holes.
Of course.
Yeah. But when it was time to rip up the porch, and I could have told you that morning I know exactly which kid is going to be like here with a big hammer and just aggressively pushing through all day long. And it's going to be my youngest son. He just rolls up his sleeves and is like, which tools are the ones that we will use to destroy this back porch? Let's go. And he worked all day. I said, I want 3 hours of labor out of each of you to the kids, and I thought it was going to take 3 days to do this, but I got super lucky because I said, all right, 3 hours of labor out of each of you guys. And they all are like, all right. I don't know, except for Liam, because he was like, yep. That's number 3. There's another name, whatever.
I like the numbers. We can just do 1, 2, 3.
So number 3 is like, yep, I'll be there. And I said, it's hot this summer. So if you want to pick your shift earlier in the morning, it'll be cooler. Otherwise, it's going to be really toasty out there. So there's my number 3. Sorry, he's number 4. He's one of the twins. So my youngest son is out there with me at 9 a.m. and we're about to get started. And I say, before we start, we got to go over to Franklin's house. There's Franklin, and borrow his circular saw because we're going to need it. I've got the dumpster right here. We got everything ready. So we can drive. He lives 1 minute away from me. We go over to his house, and we knock on the door. There's his wife. What you guys doing? Oh, we're ripping up the back porch. We need to borrow Franklin's circular saw. Oh, great. It's in the shed. What are you doing? We're ripping up the back porch, me and the kids. And she looks at her 2 kids and says, what are you 2 doing? And they're not doing anything. And she's like, let's go. So I got Margot, who's unstoppable. Like, you can't stop Margot, and her 2 kids, right? I had 6 kids and an adult and me. We ripped up that porch in 5 hours. We were done. It was amazing. I was so proud of everybody. And I know that my kids worked a little harder because their cousins, they call them their cousins, were there. And they worked a little harder because my kids were there. So everybody just ripped through it. And I got 3 hours of honest labor out of all the kids. And then I said, you can go take a break, cool off, have some lunch. I'm going to keep working. And there's my youngest son, who's 13, and he's like, no, I'll keep working too. And he just stayed the whole day with me, and we finished the job.
Pause right there.
Go ahead.
This is a great story.
Yeah.
How did you get to this point when you say, hey, kids, we're going out to do this? And they say, okay, even if they're reluctant. Because a lot of people just, their kids are like, no, I don't want to.
Okay, so I have a lot to say about chores.
Okay.
And it starts when they're young. You start kids on chores as soon as they're physically capable of doing a chore. And there's a couple rules about it. Number 1, this is the most important. Chores are never a punishment. Chores are just what you do. That's just life. You clean up after yourself. You wipe down the counter. You load the dishwasher. Whatever the chore is, right? That's just what you do. You do not punish kids with chores. That's my favorite. Okay?
That's easy to okay.
It's really easy to remember. They also have to see you do chores, right? So they just learn, like, this is life. This is what you do. You just do chores. Give them as many chores as they can handle and be successful at, because you don't do your kids any favors by doing, once you hit a certain age, like once they hit 4 or 5, 6 years old, you don't do any favors by doing things for them. And I kind of had to learn this. So did my ex-wife early, because we were outnumbered 2-1, right? So, like, you're going to learn to make your own lunch. That happened earlier in my house than I think a lot of kids. You're helping them by teaching them to make their own lunch, right? That's a skill. And the better they get at it and the earlier they learn to do it successfully, the better their life skills. Like, this is
how old was your oldest, number 1, when you...
So number 1 loves to cook, always had loved to cook. So he learned to make, I think, like mac and cheese was his first thing that he learned, like a real meal. Like, I don't know if you call mac and cheese a real meal, but like he was probably 6 or 7 years old when we were like, this is how you make mac and cheese. And he loved doing it. It was all he wanted to eat for a while, because he knew how to make it.
So we got dishes, we got meals.
You got meals.
Cleaning up bedrooms,
sweeping the floor, like, and when they get a little older, cleaning bathrooms, like getting a spray bottle and cleaning like a countertop. Like, it's not rocket science. Remember, kids have been doing chores since the dawn of time, like literally the dawn of time. Like, as soon as you could look at a kid and be like, go gather firewood, like they would, right? It is just a net positive for them.
And it seems, I could be wrong here, every kid's different, like we said, but it seems like the kids almost want to, when they're really young, my daughter wants to do a lot of things. She wants to participate.
Yeah, that's normal.
When we're working on something, or if I'm building a little IKEA furniture thing, she comes out with her tool set and like starts banging. I'm like, this is
adorable.
Cute. But I want that to keep going.
It definitely pays off. Yeah. So there's things I'm good at in dad world and things I'm bad at dad world. I'm not a great cook when it comes to the kids. Partially, this is my excuse. There's a lot of them, and they all have very different, like sometimes just dietary requirements. It's hard to make meals that satisfy more than 2 of those kids' like eating needs, which means I had to like indoctrinate them into the kitchen early and be like, look, I'm going to make a meal for you, me, and her, and you're going to eat this, that, and the other because, it's leftovers from yesterday. And if you don't want that, how to make these other dishes, because I can't cook 4 meals a night. Right.
So what else besides chores?
So,
is it kind of like the foundation? I'm just saying, like, going back to the story of like, I brought out all my kids and the neighborhood kids.
This is great. So I'm almost done with this chores speech because it keeps going and it's great. All right. So I'm not great at cooking. Like, I roll my eyes. I'm like, what's the fastest way to victory when it comes to making meals? But I am really patient at teaching them skills, right? Like, when they were little and they would come up and I was trying to do something, IKEA furniture or whatever it was, and they'd be like, I want to help. I'm really good at slowing down the project and being like, oh, good. You're here to help. Here's how you can help. Even if the project now takes 3 times as long because I've got this one measuring every piece of lumber, right? But it really pays off because they learn real skills slowly. And then, like, I think that I joked that, like, when Liam was 8 was when him helping was a net positive to the project. Like, now it goes faster because I have an extra pair of hands. Now I can literally say, go to the workshop and get this wrench. Go hold the other end of this tape measure. What does it say? Like, and it made things go faster. And now, like, I can't work without them, the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could, but it's more fun and faster, obviously. Like 5 hours for a back porch? Yeah. So you always want to, reward them with positivity and meet them at the skill level they are. You have to be patient with it. And if you don't have the patience right this second, because you don't all the time, then don't set them up for failure with a dad with a short temper. Like, if this is something that's beyond them and it's just going to slow them down, well, you can watch, or you can, we'll do something else later, because I have to focus on this because my hands are covered in thin set and you're not old enough to lay tiles yet. Like, that also happens. Don't invite them in to something that they'll fail at and you'll lose your temper, or you'll, that's not the right environment to learn this skill. I have, so don't punish kids with chores.
Right.
Okay. So this is a great story. Once the kitchen was a disaster, right? As happens sometimes. It was a mess. It needed to be cleaned. And I said, all right, after dinner, we were all cleaning this kitchen. And they're all like, all right. Okay. And we all go into the kitchen after dinner. We all start cleaning the kitchen. And one of my children, whose name I will not mention on the air, but if my kids ever listen to this, they'll know exactly which kid it was, whom I love. I love all my kids. One of my kids was just in a foul mood. The other kids were moving around, working, doing, what they felt was a quarter of the work, which is, fair. This one was just dragging their feet, just being pissy and just making everything difficult. What are you doing standing here? Like, just really, like, making it hard for the other kids to work. And I got mad. And I said, you're not going to sit here and be difficult to work with and make everybody miserable. Go upstairs. You're not allowed to work with us. And then this child started to walk away, and I realized, wait, that's a mistake, right? Because this kid just pitched a fit. It was difficult to work with. Now they don't have to clean the kitchen, right? That's a bad lesson. So I said, wait, get back here. Comes back all mad. You're going to stand here in the middle of the kitchen, and you're not allowed to do anything. You can watch the rest of us work. Oh my God. That was the most effective shame punishment ever. This poor child sat there like this, so mad. And all the other kids are cleaning up, looking at this one, right? Doesn't have to work. Working is a privilege. Like, helping out is something we do. It's a shared responsibility. And if you're not pulling your weight, it's shameful. I have never had, and now, okay, now the kids already know which kid this is. This child is the best cleaner in the family now. Whatever that traumatic experience was of being shamed into not helping, like, this is the kid who's like, who left this kitchen a mess? Why did this other kid, my sibling, leave this dish out? This is not, and then, like, if this child wants to earn money, I'm like, I'll pay you $5 to clean the kitchen. Boom. It's spotless. It's spotless. I sent her over to now, it's one of the girls. Mm-hmm. I sent her over to Franklin's house so that she could teach her cousins how to clean the kitchen. And she got paid by Franklin like $20 to clean the kitchen top to bottom so that his kids could learn from my kid how good of a job to clean. So that was, I don't know if that was the effective punishment.
Did you do any of this when you were a kid? Did you clean the kitchen? Did you do chores? Did you
start
cooking when you were 7?
I did chores a lot. But the kitchen.
What kind of chores?
Okay, so I mowed the lawn for as long as I can remember being able to push the lawnmower.
And you never got paid?
I think I got an allowance for all this, but it wasn't like a lucrative allowance. I have my kids on contract. Like, if they want to do things, I'm like, there's a list of chores. Right, yeah. There's a list of things that can get done. So if you want to earn some money, like, here's what you can do. But no, I was always doing things that were like chores. I cleaned bathrooms and, had to clean up whatever. I never remember not doing chores. If my parents listen to this, they can be like, you were such a lazy kid. Like, they'll tell me like what I didn't do. But
did you have these conversations with your ex-wife about, was she totally on board?
Oh yeah, she was totally on board.
Because I guess what I'm getting at is, like, it's great that you guys kind of, instill this on your kids, right? Because I think that like we've said, you know, nobody knows what they're doing.
No.
I mean, today there's 1,001 different opinions on how you should parent kids.
Yes.
But I think these are like foundational things that are very healthy. I don't think you can debate that.
No.
Why would you say this is a bad idea?
Well,
right?
it's because I think there's two reasons why she and I were on the same page about this early. And one of them was we were outnumbered, right? And another one was, we read some highfalutin Harvard study that said, like, because, when you're a young parent, you're all into the parenting blogs and things. And it was really clear evidence that amongst every other thing that you can control for, one of the best indicators of just success at school, at jobs, at life is like, how much chores did you do as a kid? At what age did you learn that you have to have a shared responsibility in the success of the household, basically, like, if that's one way to put it. And it was like, that makes total sense. Everything about that makes sense. The trouble is, especially when you have like 1 or 2 kids, it's easier to do all the chores yourself. It's easier. It's hard to make the kids do the chore, because for the first 18 months of this kid being in charge of whatever it is, they're going to do a mediocre job at it, and you're going to have to do it over for them anyway, right? When the kid makes mac and cheese, it is not easier for you. It is easier for you if you just do it, right? But if you get this 7-year-old to do this process, I got to clean up all the spills. I got to reward them for the success. I have to make sure they're measuring things. I have to hover over them. It takes 3 times as long to mix everything. I have to show them their mistakes, be patient. Everything about it takes long. It's so much easier to just, I'll do it. It's so much easier to do things for your child. But you're putting off the payoff, which is, eventually.
Long term, right.
I got an apple pie. Meaning, I was at work, and I'm packing up to go home, and one of my kids sends me a video of one of the other kids taking out an apple pie from the oven, hot apple pie. I didn't know she was going to make an apple pie. She didn't run this by me. She just looked in the fridge, was like, we have stuff for apple pie. How do you make an apple pie? YouTube? Got it. And then sent me a video. I had hot apple pie when I came home from one of my kids. She was 12. That kid's been baking ever since. It's quite a thing. It is, kids are as smart as we are, if not smarter, because their brains are fresh. And setting them up for mastering skills is absolutely vital to everything. It's maybe the most important parenting thing.
Yeah. How do you stay connected to 4 teenagers?
Okay.
Is that work that you kind of have put in before they hit that puberty, all those crazy hormones and all those feelings? Or is it something that you're just always working on, right?
I think that if you were to arrive in your children's life the day they turn 13, whatever it is, you were overseas or something, and you're like, I don't have a relationship with this child, then I want one. That's going to be really hard. And I have no advice for that. It's not that it can't be done. I'm sure there's success stories, but I know an awful lot of the foundational stuff was, it's like, oh yeah, this is my dad. I trust him, but I don't want to mess with him. Okay. So you remember when you said, what's a lesson that you brought from your childhood from your parents? Here it is. Okay. So my mom once told me when I was probably a teenager, both my parents are fantastic with little kids. They are
great grandparents.
So they're great grandparents, and with strangers' kids, they're just perfect. They're so good at kids. They're so child literate. My mom told me that it is absolutely important that your kids be a little afraid of you. Be a little afraid of breaking your rules. You don't want to mess with dad. You don't have to take out the belt or anything. But they should be a little afraid of you. They should be afraid of crossing your boundaries and messing with you and disobeying you. And if they're not, psychologically, if they're not a little afraid of you, no one will be afraid of you. And they don't feel safe, right? An awful lot of how safe am I when you're a child comes from who's protecting me. And that should be mom and dad. Oh, you don't want to mess with my mom, right? If that's how they feel when they get tucked in at night, then the monsters aren't afraid of mom either. That's a very simple idea, but it's actually very true, right? And it doesn't have to be dad. You don't have to be the strong one if you're the dad. You should both be firm, and also it's a very this is in a lot of the parenting blogs. You both have to be the disciplinarian. You can't have one parent say, well, wait till your father comes home. Wait till your mother comes home. Because now the authority is on the other parent, and now we learned that this parent isn't really the authority. You are both the authority. You can't mess with either of them. The rules are the rules. And you learn that really when you're little, right? And it really goes deep into okay, well, what am I allowed to get away with? What are the, when no means no, real stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And there's ways to do that. I've got a bunch to say on that, but I don't know how much time you have. But
I am curious because I think I don't want to be too dramatic here or
Right.
contribute, throw fuel on the fire.
Go ahead.
But I do think that in today's parenting, especially with kids maybe your kid's age or younger, we have so much information and we're so worried about being perfect parents
Right.
that I think sometimes we are so worried about like scarring our children, but it's like that's maybe like a bad word for it. We're not
No, it's not a bad word.
scarring.
Like, we have to selectively scar them.
That's a better way to say it.
Right.
But my point is that I don't know if there's a lot of, and that's something I'm very interested in is let me ask you, what did you do to, I mean, like you said, have your children be a little bit fearful of you?
Okay.
And how do you balance that, right?
So this is what I'm about to say is entirely a lesson I learned from my mom. Okay. So when you're raising kids, when they're little, when they are 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years old, it's a really critical time for learning what no means. No is a magic word when you're a parent. And when you say it, you have to be able to back it up. Okay? You can't chase your kids around and say, no, 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 and then not put up with defiant behavior. Okay? So the example I give is if you come home, I think I told you this at work once. If you come home and your hands are full of groceries and you're on the phone like this, right? And you open the front door and there's your 3-year-old coloring on the walls, right? And you can't put down the groceries and you can't put down the phone. Everything here is important, right? You can't discipline this kid. If you say no and the kid just laughs, ha, 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 and keeps coloring, you're going to have to keep going and just deal with it later. Do not acknowledge the behavior. Don't. Skip it. Pretend the kid knows he's doing something wrong, right? And if he doesn't, we'll address that, okay? But ignore this behavior. Pretend you don't see it. The kid will know, like, oh, mom didn't see that I'm coloring on the walls. Go finish what you're doing. Put down the groceries, end the phone call, and when you have, even if it's an hour later and the kid has found something else to occupy themselves, when you have the bandwidth to address the problem, that's when you go in the hallway and you say, Jimmy, did you color on the walls? Uh-oh, now they remember. And you bring them over. No, we do not color on the walls, right? And you can use your full attention to address this bad behavior. If you walk by this kid and don't interrupt the behavior because you don't have the attention, you're busy, don't acknowledge it, okay? Like, that's vital. My mom always counted to 3 to get us to comply with things. And I literally never remember her getting to 3. Like I literally cannot. 1, 2, right? And the reason is if you get to 3, immediately there are consequences, right? And they learn that 100, it's a law of nature. It is a law of nature, right? When you get to 3, you're going to put down the crayons and you're going to go in timeout. And you're going to go in timeout. It doesn't have to be like, you do not have to spank your kids to make this work, right? Goes in timeout, whatever timeout means in your house, right? This is a child psychology thing. 1 minute per age of child, because there are perception of time scales with their age. When they're done, they need to articulate what they did wrong and help clean it up, help mitigate the situation. Whether that's like scrubbing up the crayons on the walls or apologizing to their sister because pushed them down the stairs, whatever it was, right? They have to be remorseful. They have to hate being in timeout. It can't be a game. And you have to stick with it until it's miserable. They have to hate this experience. And the crazy truth about this is if done correctly, like if you do this, I'm too far away.
You can move it.
Yeah, if done correctly, if you get the right response, it doesn't work the first couple times, I'm sure. You have to learn. They have to learn that this is a process. They know what to expect. You don't have to do it too many times. You really don't have to do it too many times. Once they figure it out, now when you count, they will abandon the bad behavior. But you can only start counting if you know you can follow through. If you can't follow through, you can't start counting because you can never say the number 3 unless you know that you have the time and energy to put them in timeout and do the whole, what is it called? Restorative justice process. And this, because all kids
what happens when this doesn't work? Or you just have to keep going for it?
You just have to keep going for it. Now,
because if your kid comes out and is just like, still doesn't want to cooperate, what do you do?
Great. Okay. I've got 4 of them, and they all were different at this. Okay. My oldest, like I said, was physical before he was verbal, right? So it was harder to control. It was hard to get the message through that, like, you're doing something bad. You can't do this. It was just more difficult because his receptive language skills were behind it. And it actually stemmed from a hearing issue. And once we addressed that, his language took off. So that was a whole thing.
It's also your first kid.
It was also my first kid.
You learn everything.
You learn everything on your first kid. So that was tough. He wouldn't stay in timeout. Like, he would try and escape. And I asked the pediatrician, like, what do I do here? And the pediatrician said, all right, what's timeout look like? And I said, we use a corner. We use a corner of the room. It's the same corner every time, right? And he said, and he tries to escape. And I said, okay, you're not going to hurt him. Put him in timeout and put your hand on his back and just hold him in the corner. He's going to hate it. You're not hurting him. He's going to squirm. He's going to scream about it, and he hates it. And just stay there he's 4 minutes. And I probably had to do that twice, ever. And that was it. And then timeout started to work. And the threat of timeout was enough to say, like, okay, I'll change my behavior, right? That was him. That was my oldest. And 4 minutes worked for the age of 4. Mm-hmm. Then I had my number 2, who's always been a super sensitive kid. And language skills way ahead of mobile skills for the first, 18 months, right? I have to look at this kid when Katie was 2, 3, and Katie could do something wrong. And I could go, Katie, no. And Katie would go, and drop the crayons and just cry from disapproval. It was so night and day.
Different, yeah.
That I had to learn, okay, soft gloves with this kid. I don't want you to internalize, you're not a bad person. You just, we're going to go clean up the crayons, whatever it was. And Katie's always been this way. Katie's been, and sweetest kid. They're all sweet kids. Once I looked at Katie casually and I was like, Katie, you can't, no, you do better than that. You can't do that. Katie was 7. 5 minutes later, I find Katie in the shoe closet crying that she doesn't deserve a bedroom. Okay, this is different. It's a different issue. It's a different kid. Self-esteem is a much more important lesson for that kid than another kid. Liam was fine. He's number 4, right? He's my youngest son. He's doing fine. He was, I time out maybe once or twice. I don't think I ever put Katie in timeout. I don't think it ever put Katie in timeout. She just was ready to please. Liam maybe once or twice. Nora is this firecracker of a child, and I had to put Nora in timeout plenty of times. Fortunately, by now I know what I'm doing. So I'm doing the hand in the corner, just like older brother, right? Fighting the whole time. So I look at Nora and I'm like, Nora, whatever it was, you spilled this milk. You pushed the milk on the floor. You can't do that, Nora. No. I didn't spill that milk. You did. I watched you do it. We're going in timeout. In timeout. Fighting the whole time. 4 minutes for a 4-year-old. Oh, and it's a timer. Use a timer because then it's not like they defeated you, right?
The timer
The
pops.
timer is what tells you when you're done, right? So it's like a law of nature. It's just you have to be in here this is your prison sentence. You have to be in here for 4 minutes until the timer goes off. What happens if they're not compliant after the 4 minutes, Doc? I said to my pediatrician, another 4 minutes. If the kid is mentally there enough that they can stay focused on defying you for 4 minutes, they're also mentally capable of doing another 4 minutes of time. Only kid
another 4 minutes of time.
I know. It's it's a lot.
It's great.
It's hilarious. Nora's the only one who ever made it. So Nora's in the corner, kicking and screaming with my hand on her back. The timer goes off. I turn around. All right, Nora, are you ready to help clean up the milk and say you're sorry? I did not spill that milk. You made me spill that milk, Dad. That is your mess to clean. All right, back in timeout. 3 times this kid is going back in timeout. Furious. It's so much work to wear down a kid who is defiant like that. But in the end, it worked. In the end, I'm like, who spilled the milk? Oh, I spilled the milk. You going to help me clean it up? Do you want to go back in timeout? I'll help you clean it up. Right? Just so much drama out of this child. So
And what's impressive to me is there are other children around.
Yes. But they also,
it's not
so there's a theorem about big families. Only one kid acts up at a time. It's a thing. And you can ask anybody who came from a big family. It's true. Like when one kid's acting up, it's like, dad's going to be mad. All right. And they watch. They're like, I'm not messing with dad or mom or whoever. That's Jesus. Okay. They learn by watching. These kids are smart and they behave well, right? They don't look at it as an opportunity to misbehave. Take that for what it is. Like, I don't know, animal psychology, whoever we are, we used to be hunter-gatherers and the tribe has to function, whatever it is, I don't know. But like when one kid is being bad at a time. It's like a law of nature. So it's not the other kids that often get in the way of like handling a problematic child. It's usually life. It's usually like, I have to go to work. I have to get out the door. My spouse needs help doing X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. The babysitter is going to be here and I have to go out the door in 5 minutes and I don't want to leave a crying child in the hands of the babysitter because it's rude. Right. Like life gets in the way of this process. The other kids usually don't. So I think like after you get through that and they're 5 and 6 years old and they're good at complying and they know how to navigate life and they know when they've done something wrong, you can just look at them and be like, no, go clean up your mess. And they just do. It does set a good ground rule for like them growing up in what they feel like is a secure house and saying, I know the rules. I know that if I mess up, my parents love me, but I'm going to be in trouble. I don't want to break the rules. And then they learn as they become adolescents, like, okay, well, I'm kind of almost an adult. Like I know what I can get away with and I know what I can't get away with. And I still know that when dad says, don't smoke cigarettes, they know that, kids are going to lie to you when they're teenagers. They're going to go do things they're not supposed to do. But a lot is to be said for like, okay, but I know I don't want to cross my parents. I don't, like they know. I had an example of this.
Let me ask you a question and we can revisit. But
sure.
And I think I kind of maybe already asked it, but I think a very common thing for parents to go through is their kids hit puberty. And this is Mother Nature. Your kids are disconnecting from you as much as they can. Do you find yourself still having an open line of communication with your kids? And like, how do you stay connected to a teenager, right? You have 4 of them, 4 different personalities. You're in the process of, there's probably different levels of it with all 4 of your kids because they're different people.
Yeah.
So like, how do you manage staying connected to your teenagers?
So I'm still figuring this out. And like I said, you'll have to ask me in 10 years how well it worked. But one thing, like this is what I say about raising teenagers. Most of the time, you're actually pretty hands off. You're making sure they get healthy food to eat. They have access to activities that'll get them exercise and a safe place to hang out with their friends. And they're not online talking to predators. Like that's most of the job. And it's not that day to day. It's not that labor intensive. I can go zip down to Paul's house and record a podcast and be like, don't burn the house down. And they won't.
Let me ask a better question.
Well, hold on. I have,
okay.
That's most of the job, but 2 to 3 hours out of every week, you're going to spend at 9 PM to midnight listening to a mental breakdown. Because that's what happens, at 9 o'clock when I'm ready to watch Game of Thrones and I'm like, I'm like, okay, parenting is done for the day. Like the kids are in their rooms doing their own things. Downstairs will come a kid with something they want to talk about. And it's heavy, like the girl that I like doesn't like me back. I think I'm going to fail this class because I just don't understand French, stuff that, it's small, large stakes. It matters the whole world to this kid. And what you do then is basically say, like, an adult who cares, this is what it looks like. So when you go and find a spouse or a friend or something when you're an adult, if you don't see this kind of empathy out of them, if they make fun of you for your problems, if they are cruel or they don't want to listen to you, they're not someone who cares about you. So I'm your model for what adult dialogue should look like. That's what you're doing. So you mostly just listen. You mostly just say like, that's tough. It's going to feel like heartbreak for a long time. And don't lie to them. Just be real. Just say, like, these are adult feelings you're having. Sometimes they're awful, right? Sometimes I think that my boys are a lot more closed off than my girls, and that's kind of normal from what I hear. But when they have breakdowns like crazy, right? Like when they burst, they burst. So talk to them about real things when you have conversations at dinner or whatever. I love talking to my kids about AI, like the real ethical dilemmas, because they're totally intellectually ready to have real conversations about copyright infringement. They're just totally, they understand. Like, yeah, Mac plays guitar. What would it be like if someone took every guitar track he ever made, put it in an AI algorithm, and then made a simulated Mac and then made money off it? Would that be fair to Mac? And they're like, no, they understand these concepts, and it's the stuff they're going to have to be dealing with. So, consent and relationships and work ethic and all these things and politics. They love talking about politics. And I think, not to dig politics up out of the ground and be like, let's talk about politics, but the most important thing to do, and this is very Jewish upbringing of me, is when they think they have a political view, argue against them with the most rational version of the opponent's argument, right? Don't just sit here and be like, I agree, so-and-so is a piece of junk, and I can't wait for them to go to jail because they're a blah, 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 blah. That's just a feedback loop, and you're not teaching them how to be intellectually honest, right? So if they come at you with, most kids are super liberal, just in general, in every generation since the dawn of time. So when they come at you, and I am not going to talk about my politics in particular, but I'll say that I often agree with an awful lot of the points that my kids bring up, but basically 100% of the time, when they come at me and say, I think whatever, I will come up with the most rational version of the opponent's argument so that they can learn how to defend their own argument. And they actually really love this process. I tell myself they love this process. They engage in this process. I'm sure that,
like you said, we'll see what they feel like in 10 years. But it seems like,
but learning how to argue and defend yourself is more important than learning how to agree and hate the other team.
Absolutely,
right.
I think that's beautiful, man. I think that's fantastic. I'm just going to keep writing all this down. I'm going to go back and watch this and be like,
yeah. So like, it all down, man. It's important because, that debate isn't often taught. I remember one of the funniest things, I don't know why they liked this game, but even when they were like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, like about the time, like around then, they started playing court, right? It's super weird. And like, I think I might have been the one who instigated it when one of them came at the other one and was like, this one stole my whatever, right? My video game, whatever it was. And I said, oh, that's a big accusation. Like, you're going to have to defend yourself for that. And we like, all right, you're going to be the prosecutor and you're going to be the defense and I'll be the judge. And they would sit there and they just laughed the whole time. They thought it was hilarious. Liam stole this morning, went into my room and put it in his bag and I found it. And therefore, he's guilty of blah. And Liam would get up and be his own defendant and be like, I was allowed to borrow it because you took it yesterday for 4 hours longer than you were supposed to, whatever it was. And then here's Mac being the judge being like, I'll allow it. It was totally off the rails and, whatever kangaroo BS court. Like, it's stupid, but they loved it. It was hysterical. And they like learned, I would tell them like, you can't be the jury and the prosecutor. You can't be the jury and the prosecutor. You got to find somebody else to be the jury. And they'd be like, oh, right. Like, you were allowed, we didn't have enough people to be everybody. So, like, this one would be the jury and the judge. Okay, fine. That's not antithetical to honest justice. But you can't, like, you had to have some kind of impartiality. So we, like, learned about this stuff. And it was, I have no idea if any of them, like, internalized it. And, I don't think I'm going to get a lawyer out of any of them. Not that I want a lawyer out of any of them, but, like.
That sounds like a fun game, though. And it sounds like a healthy, fun game.
It was so healthy. It was so
wholesome. How to communicate. And, all the lessons you just talked about. Let me ask you one more thing.
Okay.
And then I think we can wrap up. Just hammering down more on the connection thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about... Okay, so let me just go on my little spiel here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Success to me, right? What does that word mean, right? To me...
Are we talking about success for you or for your kids or for everybody? Like
everybody.
Okay.
But I'm going to talk selfishly.
All right, go ahead.
Success to me means growing up, raising your kid or kids or whatever, specifically talking about parenthood, success when it comes to parenthood. Of course, you want to provide for them financially, all that. Mm-hmm. But really what success to me is when your kids grow up, become adults, and invite you into their adult lives, right? Because I feel like, we'll talk in 10, 15, 20 years
Right.
and see where we're at.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're always going to want to spend time with your kids. And I see this a lot with my parents, my in-laws. They just want to spend time with us.
Which is good.
That's it.
You're doing a great job.
So,
Yeah.
that being said, do you remember, did you always have a good relationship with your parents? And do you agree with what I just said?
I do agree with what you just said. I think it's a great measure of success. I think there's lots of measures of success,
Sure.
and I think that's a very healthy one. I'm sure if you ask my parents, they'd be like, "Oh, when you were a teenager, you were a mess," and I'm sure I was, and butted up against them all the time. But I had kids young, and I definitely was like, my parents were great parents, and I need them as a resource. And like, I definitely would not have as much success as a dad if it wasn't for their influence, both when I was a kid and now as grandparents. When they moved to Maryland to become grandparents full time when I had the twins. The way that
That's exactly my point.
Right. My dad tells a story that he found out that my brother was getting that full ride scholarship to Princeton the same day. I don't know if it's true that he found out that I was having twins. So he was like, "Oh, we don't have to pay for Matt's college, and John's having 4 kids. Let's move back to Maryland and be full-time grandparents." And we're at their house most Fridays for Shabbos dinner. They're when during the pandemic, when I was like, "All right, they're going to fall behind academically. Mom, I need you to tutor these kids in math once a week." And she was like, "Sure." I definitely would have dumber kids who were meaner with less patience if I didn't have my parents to help me do a good job as, the auxiliary parents when it was needed. So they're involved in my life a lot. They're getting a little older now, but it's still and I definitely, the joke was that as soon as I had a house, I would call home and I'd be like, "Hey Mom, is Dad there?" And she'd be like, "Sure. Do you want to talk to him?" Yeah. The boiler's not working. And I'd talk to my dad for hours and hours and hours about how to fix stuff because I'm trying to keep this ship from sinking. And my mom got left out in the cold. It was what about, yeah. So it's, because my dad is a fix-it guy and I'm a fix-it guy and we fix stuff. So I'm sorry. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no. I mean, no. So your parents move in, or not move in.
They moved to Maryland.
They moved close, but I guess what I'm getting at is, what do you see in the future, man? What's your next life cycle of
I don't know.
if you ever forget about being a grandparent.
Yeah, I have.
But then there's no way. There's so much work to do
there's
right
so
now.
Much.
With
Well, it's just.
Right?
I mean,
I can't even think of that.
I don't know. I tell people all the time when I meet kids who are 20 years younger than me who are trying to get into the film industry, and my own kids, I'm like, look, everyone is going to tell you how to succeed in a job market 20 years ago. I know how to get into the film industry in 2008. I don't know how to get into the film industry today, right? And that's going to be true of every industry. You're going to be like, "I want to become a lawyer." Okay, well, 20 years ago, you would go and get an internship at a law firm. I don't know if that's what you do today. I don't. And if you ask a lawyer today, they'll tell you how to succeed when they graduated college. I don't know how to succeed in the job market today. I can give you as much wisdom as I can, but you're going to have to figure this out on your own and ask peers and people a little older than you. What should I do? Am I being taken advantage of by an employer, or should I accept this unpaid internship? Right? Should I move across the country to work closer to the industry that I'm interested in pursuing? Or should I try and work remotely for now? I don't know. I don't know. You need to ask people closer to your own age who have achieved some kind of success that you want. You can't ask somebody 20 years older than you. Mm-hmm. So what does success look like for the kids? I don't know. I want them to thrive. I don't want them to find massive credit card debt. I would love it if they could afford their own homes one day. It's a weird world out there. And I try and teach things like financial literacy and, work ethic and all those things. And, some version of those is going to be necessary to get a leg up.
What about socially? Anything there? Or
yes,
they're going to be who
100%. They are going to be who they are. But I always, especially once the pandemic hit, I grew up at my friends' houses. They were at my house all the time. I was at their house all the time. I remember we joked that my buddy James and I probably spent 5 days in a row where we weren't more than 10 feet away from each other for a summer. That's who we were. We were super social kids. And kids these days are a little less like that. They're more likely to play online. They're more likely to be remotely removed. They're more likely to enjoy social things that can be enjoyed in separate houses, together but apart. And fine, I get it, the times change, but I am kind of like a fuddy-duddy about you should be in each other's spaces. It's different when you can make eye contact. And, to a varying degree, all my kids have, I think, accepted that lesson pretty well. And I think the best decision I ever made in this regard is teaching the twins. I taught them all, but the twins really ran with it, was teaching them how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Because the twins were 7, and I was like, you're too young for this game. They were like, teach us anyway. And I ran a game for the kids. They were 7, and the twins were 7. Katie was 9. Mac was 11. And they all loved it. They all had a great time. And they all continued to play in a very, mostly the twins. The twins are still the twins have, with their group of 8 friends or so, have 3 games going concurrently. They're always at each other's houses complaining about my friend, she's not running the game right because she lets everybody share their stats. You're not supposed to know how strong each other are. You're supposed to have to figure that out in the game. This is crap. And I'm like, if she wants to run the game that way, that's her game. I know, but it's not this is the drama. And it's hilarious to me. And it's super wholesome. And they are at each other's houses all the time. I'm really this is vital for proper development. I think board games and card games and role-playing games, the kind that you need a pen and a paper and a table to play, are so good for child development that you absolutely have to enable your kids to get into that world. I'm kind of against video games. I know that they're pervasive, and I know that a lot of people play them successfully and with moderation and all of those things. And, violent video games don't cause school shootings. I totally know all of that stuff. But they're addictive in a way that isn't good for brains. A lot of people have trouble abusing them. I had to quit video games in college, or I would have failed out of college. Right? Sophomore year, I was like, that's it. I taught, it was World of Warcraft.
Oh, yeah.
No joke. So, I was totally addicted to, I think, StarCraft something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I was totally addicted to it. And I finally, after playing 8 hours of this game every chance I could, I was like, all right, it's finally out of my system. I don't want to play StarCraft anymore. I'm fatigued by it. Mm-hmm. And I knew that as soon as another video game shows up, it'll get me. But I'm in school. I'm in college. I got high bandwidth internet, for the first time. And I'm on the computer science floor. Everybody was playing these games on LAN. It was so bad. And then World of Warcraft came out, and Franklin put it on his computer. That's how I met Franklin. And he's like, check it out. World of Warcraft came out. And I looked at it, and I sat and I played for 5 minutes, and I said, this is heroin. I can't do this. And I was like, I can't play this game. I will never graduate. And I haven't played, I'm going to say I haven't played video games since. I mean, I've been pretty sober.
I have a similar story with World of Warcraft. By the way, I kind of still play a little bit. I dabble.
When I retire, I'm going to make a character. It's going to be that's going to be it.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
What's Dad up to? He won't get off
leave his
WoW.
room. I can't, I think he's...
When WoW came out a month after my first girlfriend broke up with me.
Oh, God, you poor soul.
I was a senior in high school.
Right.
Oh, it was game over. So I played, but I actually didn't really play obsessively. I played
good for you.
Slow.
Some
but
people,
I was playing, still a few hours a week at least, right?
Yeah. I could never play
Not
a few hours a week.
A few hours a day.
No.
So then, I go to MC. I'm not meeting any friends. I'm just playing WoW in my mom's basement. I'm playing Warcraft. I'm just like,
right.
Something's got to change. And so something similar happened once I went off to school.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into my apartment. I was living with 3 other guys. I didn't want to be on the computer. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to meet girls, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So that's when I stopped. And then I didn't play. So that was I was 18 or 19. I didn't play until I was 26 or 27. Then I dabbled back into it. But anyway, point being
but then you had a whole frontal cortex.
You have to stop a game or any sort of addiction if you want to grow. You will never grow.
No, they're not good for you. Yeah.
They're not.
And dopamine, everybody is addicted to dopamine. It's literally what the word addiction means.
Scrolling on the phone.
Oh, it's the worst. And that's a big conversation we have a lot of. I actually called out one of my kids the other night because I'm trying to watch. Do you ever seen Ex Machina?
No.
It's a great film. And it's about AI. And it was sort of why I was like, let's watch this. And I got one kid to sit and watch it with me. But they're on the phone the whole time. which usually doesn't happen. But I wanted to watch this movie, and I was hoping that this one would watch it with me, and I'll settle for it because they're following the plot. So like they're commenting on what's happening, and they're like creeped out by the creepy parts, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to allow it. And then I'm Josh, and I'm like, you should put your phone away, right? And the phone goes away. Fine. I'm hungry immediately. And I said, that's dopamine addiction. As soon as you're done with one stimulus, you need another stimulus. And this kid's like, so mad. Like, fine, I'm totally addicted to dopamine. Like, so like we're coming, like I'm trying to teach, like, look, I can't protect you from addiction. I can't protect you from addiction. You have to learn to protect yourself from it. And it's one of the most dangerous things. I'm going to give a plug to a book. You should read Dopamine Nation.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the author.
I love books. I'm starting to read more now.
Dopamine Nation is, like, I joke that 60% of the content of that book is in the title. Dopamine Nation. Yeah, we're all addicted to dopamine. I got it. But it is really good about like the biomechanics of like what happens when you're used to constant stimulus and how to escape it, and like a bunch of really interesting stories. It's super easy read, and it's a great book.
Have you read Atomic Habits or heard of it? Very
but
good.
If you recommend a book, I'll probably read it.
Atomic Habits. It's essentially about making small little changes over a long period of time. And it's about how you break bad habits, how you form good ones.
Yeah.
It sounds basic, but it's a good read just to kind of understand how habits are made. We all have bad habits.
Of course.
Right?
Not me.
So
I don't have any bad.
Oh, you're perfect.
They're all awful.
No. Well, John, thanks for coming over, man.
Thanks for having me.
This has been great.
We're going to do it again in 10 years, and you'll be like, so what went wrong? And I'll be like, oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
I started playing WoW.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you are somebody that I look up to. I think a lot of people should look up to you in today's parenting world, because it seems like you're very open to your kids. It seems like they have a lot of conversations with you.
I have really great kids. Great kids. I could not do this without 4 really great kids. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, you and your ex-wife sounds like you're doing a great job.
You should have her on the podcast too, and Franklin. You should definitely.
No, I would love to. I would actually love to get people on that I don't know.
Right.
But we're getting the reps in. This is like the 10th episode, so we're
feels
good.
There. Let me know when you're ready for another guest. I'll see if I can wrangle you some people.
I will, man.
Persons.
Well, hopefully I see you on set sometime.
I'm sure you will.
All right.
Sweet. Thanks.
See you out there, man.
That's great.
Cool. Thanks, dude.
Thank you.